What's going on, guys? Today we're going to be talking about fishing in rivers and creeks, specifically for smallmouth, although this also applies to largemouth. One of my favorite ways to catch smallmouth is just in creeks from shore or wading. I do it a lot, as you've seen in past videos. So I'm going to kind of break this down based on season and what lures I would use. So we've got the main things we've got are going to be a crawfish imitator with a tube, and then all the rest are basically bait fish imitators. From my past experience, what I've found is that you don't have to get too fancy with it when you're fishing for these smallmouth and creeks. Because of the current, they just need to eat. They're always moving, they always have to eat. Because these fish are always in current, they're always going to be needing to eat, and they're going to be looking for the most calorie efficient meal. And that is why a lot of these are more bait fish oriented, because bait fish are easier for them to eat. They're a lot more calorie dense per the effort, because if you think about it, a crawfish has got big pincers, and those can really hurt a bass if they're not doing it correctly. Which is why a lot of these selections are a little bit more bait fish heavy. So for early spring, pretty much first ice out, about April, May, around here, you're gonna start throwing your crankbaits for the most part. That's what I'm gonna be throwing. This is a KVD 1.0, but you can do any smaller crankbait is what I like. The thing about a crankbait is it is a little more costly, obviously, and in these rivers and creeks, you're just gonna get stuck a lot more. It's just the nature of the game with the current and all the rocks and debris that get washed in from storms and stuff. But a crankbait works really well, especially a Squarebill, because the bill allows you to deflect off of rock. And again, you can do this in a crawfish or bait fish pattern, but it's just gonna really get those bites and get a reaction strikes. And what I like about them is you can remove them very slowly because of the fact that they float. And moving slow is very important in the cold water temperature. A tube is another bait that works very well in the cold water. You can work it slow, you can work it fast. I like to do a 1/4 ounce, but sometimes I go up to a 3/8 ounce head. That head, the heavier the head, the easier it is to get snagged, but you can also work it a lot slower because the current's not moving it as fast. As the water warms up, we start moving into a swim bait that you can move. You can definitely slow roll it, but it's a lot harder to slow roll than a crankbait, which is why when the water is warming up, I like to use a 3-inch spark shad. It comes through the rock pretty well. You got only one hook point, so you don't have as much worry about it getting stuck in grass or anything as the grass comes up. And a lot of times the other thing is that along with the jig head for the tube, they're very cheap a lot of the times if you don't use a tungsten one like this Kitech one. They're very cheap, so you can afford to snag and break off a couple times, whereas if you were to break off one crankbait, it costs about the same as like 10 different jig heads. But as the summer comes on, the bait fish start to spawn, which is when you'll also throw in a spook or some other topwater. A lot of those shad, you'll have shad spawn, you'll have the little tiny shiner spawning, and those fish really get keyed in on bait fish. You don't have to stick with a spook for a topwater. I like anything that mimics a bait fish of some sort skittering across the top. A Jackall riser bait also works very well for this application. As we get into late summer, early fall, it's about the same in terms of setup for what we're targeting these fish, but I will back off on the tube a little bit more because you get a lot of that dying grass, which doesn't really work well with a tube on the bottom. You got the other thing is these fish just get more keyed in on bait fish, so you're just going with your top waters, your swim baits, and I'll even bring in a 5-inch Magdraft or some other larger bait. That'll really get these fish fired up, as in the fall the bait's basically as big as it's going to get for the year, and these fish are feeding up, so they're going to be looking for a big meal. The best part about this is you don't have to get fancy with it if you don't want to, but you can for sure. You can throw expensive baits if you're willing to lose them, because you're definitely going to lose them. But you can also go really cheap and still catch a ton of fish with just a jig head and a swim bait. Once we get back to winter, we're back into that early spring scenario in terms of baits we're using. Tube is going to start playing more of a role as that grass starts dying and not being as big of a problem. You can always slow roll a swim bait, and then the crankbait comes back around also as that grass dies out. Around here, usually I am not fishing the rivers as much just because you'll get ice on your line and it's not as much fun as ice fishing. So that's going to wrap it up for this video. If you guys enjoyed, feel free to leave a like and subscribe, and let me know if there's any baits that I missed that you guys like to throw in your local rivers and creeks. These are just what works best for me in the Midwest. So I'll see you guys in the next one.